we are going to get started. Good morning. Happy Saturday, everybody. My name is Alton Wong. I am the current president of the Board of Trustees here at Pasadena City College. Just want to welcome you all to our campus and our Traveling Lounge on our 100th anniversary of Pasadena City College. We are really pleased to partner with Senator Anthony Portantino to host this important gathering right here at PCC. And PCC really does share Senator Portantino's commitment to supporting and enhancing the mental health and wellness of the young people in our communities. And Senator Portantino has been a steadfast champion for PCC and for supporting the well-being of youth across the state through advocacy and legislation. In fact, Senator Portantino held one of his very first bill introductions here at PCC more than 6 years ago now. That bill, SB 328, pushed back school start time by 1 hour in order to support the sleep health of students. And so today is really a bit of a full circle moment for us as Senator Portantino nears the end of his tenure in the legislature. We're gathering here today to continue these critical conversations around youth health and wellness. Here at PCC, for example, our Office on Mental Health and Wellness Services provides confidential and non-judgmental support for our students' personal growth and psychological wellness. PCC offers events, programs, and support to ensure our students can achieve their goals and thrive. Supporting the mental health of our youth is a shared responsibility, and we work with partners in the community to make sure our students are receiving the services that they need. Looking around at all of the partners in the room here today, all the services here today, I recognize folks that have been here at our campus and tabling at different events or providing resources to our students here at PCC, including, I see in the back, Sycamores, that frequently takes part in our health and wellness fairs and is a part of our referral network, allowing us to pair our students with tailored services. I'm deeply encouraged by events like today's town hall. Not only do they provide an opportunity to learn about the resources that are out there to help, they also play an important role in reducing the stigma around conversations around mental health. I hope you'll leave today feeling empowered to support yourselves, your loved ones, and to advocate for the well-being of our youth and to continue these critical conversations. We're thrilled to be able to host this here at Pasadena City College, and we're thrilled to also be able to welcome Senator Anthony Portantino and all the work that he's done. We thank him for that. Thank you, Senator.
Let's give it up for our host, Alton Wong and PCC, for being here with us today. And all of you, it's a good thing UCLA is not doing very well this year because they started at 9 o'clock and I think they're 1-5. So none of you are watching the football game today. You're here for a much more important topic. Before we get started, I want to introduce, we have several elected officials with us. We have Scott Harden, who's a board member-elect from PUSD. Where are you? There he is, right there. Give it up. We have Octavia Thuss from LCUSD School Board. There she is in the back. We have John Primuth, the South Pasadena City Council is here. And Michelle Wright, who's a council member in the Monrovia Arcadia Duarte City Town Council is here. I want to give a big shout out to my staff for putting this on. Let's give them a big round of applause. Because I like to say I show up and I do microphone and they do all the work, so it's all good. Today's program consists of two presentations. We have a youth panel, and then we have with 4 panelists from the LA Suicide Prevention Network. We have we'll take Q&A from them. We also have, hold on one second. We also have some experts, and then we have this resource panel. So let's give all our resource panelists a big round of applause. As you all know, I have 2 daughters, and they're a decade apart, and it taught me a lot about life, having 2 daughters a decade apart. The world changed during that decade significantly, and I love my daughters, but they're very different, and they both had different challenges, and so behavioral health issues is something very important to me. You all know my personal story with losing a brother tragically to suicide as well, and one of my main points is we go to a party and we'll talk about our cholesterol, we'll talk about our sprained ankle, we'll talk about a sports injury, we'll talk about all kinds of things, but we don't talk about our behavioral health challenges. We don't talk about our mental health challenges. And, for me, it was one of the reasons why I talk about my brother's situation, because I want people to know if my family has been touched by depression and anxiety and suicide, then we know most families have, if not all families have. And so I think we need to bring this out of the shadows. And so we put the suicide hotline number on student IDs. And one of the coolest parts of that is I've had parents come up to me and say, it stimulated a conversation in our household. It's not just a resource. It made us aware of the problem. Obviously, you heard Alton talk about late start. 35 years of research on sleep science that said if you move school start time back and let teenagers sleep, they'll be healthier, they'll be happier, they'll think about suicide less, they'll do less drugs, and they'll get better scores. And so I just heard that there's a couple school districts in south of us who are still resistant to this, even though it's state law, which defies, it just drives me crazy. 35 years of research, happier kids, better test scores. We shouldn't be opposing this. We should be embracing this. I'm going to run through our resource tables. We've got great resource partners with us today. We got the Chinatown Service Center. We've got D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center. We got Foothill Family Services. We got the LA County Suicide Prevention Network. We got the LA County Department of Mental Health. We have NAMI San Gabriel Valley, Pacific Clinics, Pelican Cove Counseling, and Sycamore. So let's give them all a big round of applause for being here. In addition, I have to talk about legislation to make this legal, so I have to do that. So it's not because I'm self-promoting, but this is a legislative update. So obviously, we talked about late start, we talked about the suicide hotlines, but we also did behavioral health curriculum in schools. So as part of health class, students are going to be armed with the knowledge about behavioral health when they're in health class. And again, going back to my own daughters, and one of the observations I've made about today's youth is today's teens are far more nurturing around their peers than don't you agree, Doctor? They look out for each other so much more so than generations past. Now, part of me thinks that's beautiful, but it's also recognizing that they know instinctively that their peers need that care, and they're there to provide it. And so that's why having it be part of curriculum, because as we know, there's nobody more of a better advocate for themselves than teenagers. We've all had conversations with teenagers, right? And we all know that they're right, and we're not. Right? We know that. Yeah, and I learn from my daughters all the time, and so why not give them more formal behavioral health education in school? And so that's what we did through legislation. We're here today because we want to advocate for our kids. The other cool thing for me as a legislator is during my time in office, I've actually introduced two bills that got signed by two different governors that were bills initiated by interns in my office. And again, when we stop and we listen to young people, we get really good ideas. And I'll share the two bills. When I was in the assembly, my intern saw a documentary on the free tattoo removal that Homeboy Industry does for gang members who want to get their gang tattoos removed. But in the documentary, it said young women who were forced into prostitution and trafficked could not get their tattoos removed. So if their pimp had put his name on her, they couldn't get that removed because the protocol was for gang members only, not women forced into prostitution and trafficking. So we had to change state law to make those girls eligible to get the free tattoo removal. That was a bill suggested by an intern. So she should get all the credit for that. And then last year I had all my interns pitch bills. Last year my intern pitched a bill about fentanyl test strips and allowing high school and middle school students to carry the test strips on them without having to get permission from their parents or the school district. And so again, so many of these overdoses are unintended because the kids don't know what they're ingesting. And so to have the ability to test what's on campus available will save lives. And so Governor Newsom signed the bill and it had two parts. Kids are now allowed to carry Narcan and test strips without having anybody's permission or sign off. And so January 1, that becomes state law. So one of your all homework assignments is we need to educate young people that they're allowed to do this. And so that was an intern's bill. So I'm very excited that, I've been in a position to make change. And, I was just at a panel talking about the future, and somebody asked me, what recommendation do I have as we plan the future? And I said, ask young people, because we're planning their future. Make sure they have a seat at the table. And so today we're going to hear from some really cool young people. So thank you for being out today. We have multiple parts to this day. And again, I want to give a big shout out to my staff and everybody in PCC for coming out. Let's give them all a big round of applause. And so our first speaker is Dr. Soheil Sood. Dr. Sood is an associate clinical professor of pediatrics in the Division of Pediatric Hospital Medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. He also cares for newborn and hospitalized children at the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital in Washington and Washington Hospital in Fremont. In January, Dr. Sood joined the State of California Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative as its director. He completed his clinical training at UCSF in the Pediatric Leadership for Underserved Plus program and served as chief resident. He earned his medical degree with research honors from Tufts, where he received the Sidney Gellis Award in Pediatrics. He holds a master's degree in international affairs from Tufts Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and a bachelor's degree from Brown University. And keeping with my policy, I'd never want to be the smartest person in the room, because if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And so please give it up for Dr. Sood, who will come share some time with us.
Thank you so much, Senator Portantino. In keeping line with your comments, I don't call myself the smartest person in the room. I think it's the four folks who are going to be in this panel very shortly, so it's really just an honor to be here. One thing in addition about my bio is I'm a dad as well. I've got a second and fourth grader, live in the Bay Area, so they're in California public schools up there. And yeah, this issue definitely hits home in terms of kids' mental health, both in terms of what I see sometimes in my children and in my families, but also what I see as a pediatrician. And I still practice, as was mentioned, I take care of kids in hospitals, and I've seen substance use, and the manifestations of that. I've seen suicide attempts. I've seen eating disorders. A little bit ago, I took care of an 8-year-old who had among the most severe abdominal pain I've ever seen in my career. And, us and the emergency room team, we put her through a battery of tests, blood work, imaging, IV narcotic medications. And basically, the studies showed that the problem wasn't from the neck down. And the more you unpack these issues, the more you see the ways sometimes stress manifests in our life can actually make differences in our physical bodies as well. And so if that's what I'm seeing, which might consider the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure all of you, and particularly all of our partners providing care in the community, you're seeing much more of it. And you're seeing the many manifestations of this issue. And the data bears that out, right? You name it, anxiety, depression, suicide rates, they're increasing by and large. And so I do have the honor of directing California's Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, which is a multi-billion-dollar investment from the state to address this, to make a difference here. And so I'll walk through a few pieces of that initiative, and then I'm happy to take questions afterward, or we can see kind of where the conversations go. But in general, the way I think about the work is we are really trying to transform the lives of our children, our youth, and our families. And by asking them, by talking to them, they've said two things. They've said, do more and do different, right? We can't just do the same all the time. So starting with the do more, that I think of as a lot of the work that we're doing in the healthcare sector in particular. So we are working with the many fine training institutions of the state so that every year they grow their training slots. So ultimately, in this state, we'll have more psychiatrists, we'll have more psychologists, we'll have more psychiatric nurse practitioners, we'll have more social workers. But then to the idea of doing different, they've also said, when we see someone, a professional, to support us, we want them to look like us. We want them to be younger. We want them to speak our language. Thankfully, I'm seeing some nods in the front row here. Yeah. So we've essentially codified a new profession in the state called a certified wellness coach. And the idea behind that, and you'll hear maybe Jocelyn can share a little bit more about her background, but really to be a therapist, a psychologist, oftentimes you need a master's degree or a doctorate degree, right? And there's not many professions out there that are behavioral health specialists that focus on the early part of the career. So associate's degree, bachelor's degree, you're coming out of college, sometimes there's not really a job or a position for you in that space. And the state has essentially created one now. And we're working with community colleges, with the Cal State system, and with many others to stand up training programs for this and then to certify them. Because ultimately, this certified wellness coach, if it becomes a healthcare provider, then we can tap into healthcare dollars, right, to sustain the work and have managed care plans and insurance companies pay for the services that they're providing in communities, in schools, in clinics throughout the state. So that's part of the ways that we're thinking about things differently. And then even before that, before you get to college, you're in high school. So how can we nurture a passion for this work? Because it's important, right? And we need people who understand the science and who really drive this work forward. And so I'll just put up a little teaser that the third speaker here, Dr. Jocelyn Mays, is going to talk about our Youth Mental Health Academy, which the goals of which are just that, to nurture that passion and then hopefully lead you on to careers that work in that space. So that's a little bit about what's happening in the healthcare space. We're also spending close to $500 million to build more facilities because we know that there are long wait lines to get into residential treatment centers. There are long wait lines to get outpatient substance abuse support. So up and down this state, there's a lot of work happening and ground being broken and more facilities being built or expanded. But when we talk about doing different, what the youth have also said is don't just meet us at the doctor's office. If we're really going to make a difference here, we have to be prevention-oriented and we have to be in the places where lives are lived, which is in schools and certainly in colleges. It's in homes and communities, and it's online. And so in schools, building off the great work that Senator Portantino mentioned about a behavioral health curriculum, there is also work that happens outside of that structured curriculum, that happens in the math class, that happens in PE, that's a framework called social and emotional learning. And it's kind of the way you teach in addition to what you teach. And we're working with all 58 counties and the education folks, the county offices of education, to build that capacity to learn that skills better and stronger. For example, my kids, my second and fourth graders, I think it was more so in second grade, where they learn the concept of tying colors to emotions. And when my daughter's in the red zone, she's learning the actions she can take to get to the green zone, right? And the different ways to calm herself down and to have that emotional connection. So we want everyone to really learn how to take care of themselves. And then for adults in schools, teachers, janitors, bus drivers, administrators, we've launched a free course and working with the superintendent of public instruction and many others to say, let's all learn the biology of stress. Let's all learn how to be trauma-informed so that when we are working with young people, we approach that work to create safe, stable, nurturing relationships. And so we built a fantastic course. I've taken it myself, and it's really changed the way I think about some things, called Safe Spaces, which is free for anybody who's really working with anybody ages 0 to 18. And then finally, the other thing I'll mention in schools, and this also applies to community colleges and the Cal State system and the UC system, is we're working to change the way healthcare is covered so that behavioral healthcare services that are provided in a school-linked manner are covered by managed care plans and Medi-Cal in the state. So that when a kid is coming to you in stress, you don't have to say, stop, let me look at your social security number, let me look at your insurance card, to make a decision if I can do more for you. Yeah. It's great work, it's hard work, it's a work in progress, but really appreciate the partnership with the community colleges and certainly with the K-12 sector in some of this work that we're doing here. So that's a little bit about what's happening in schools. In homes and communities, we know there are many things that have strong evidence base behind them. Home visiting programs, parenting programs, youth centers, community centers, wellness programs. So up and down this state, we're supporting those and we're scaling those. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going out to community organizations in a culturally competent, equity-focused manner to do the work that they're already doing, but to do more of it, right? Tribal organizations, communities that focus on LGBTQ populations, persons of color, all of these are our focus areas in some of the work that we're doing there. And then in the digital space, and I'm wondering, actually, oh great. So I'll share a little bit about some of the digital tools that we have. And I will say I have a complex and fraught relationship with this little thing here, as I imagine many of you do too. It's the bane of my existence, and it's so convenient, right? And on the convenience side, I, both as a pediatrician and as a member of my community, I've been asked many times, my kid needs help and I don't know where to turn. And if I go online, I have to pay out of pocket hundreds of dollars. And if I go to my doctor, I have to wait weeks, months sometimes to get the care. So unprecedented in the US, California has stood up 2 virtual service platforms where you can connect directly with a professional coach to get some support. This first one up here is called Bright Life Kids, and I'll say 0 cost, no insurance needed. This one is for parents and caregivers and children ages 0 to 12. And I use it myself with my kids. And what's great about Coach Jackie, who we work with, is that she talks about things with my kids that I would never as a dad, and I also would never as a pediatrician. They kind of fit that nice sweet spot. So one of the things they told me that they talked about was this idea of a circle of control, right? There are things I can control and there are things I can't. And for someone whose family, has anxiety and depression in it, I think that's such a great tool to learn about. The idea of a growth mindset is another thing that they're learning about. Like, I can't do this math problem, I can't do this jungle gym exercise yet. That's the idea of a growth mindset, right? And so just these little tools, these little language pieces, I feel are making a difference in my family, and I hope that they make a difference for everybody. Again, 100% free, no insurance needed, available in English and Spanish, and with 17 other languages available with phone support. A similar tool called Saluna for children and young adults and teens ages 13 to 25. And you can see this looks different and feels different because teens and young adults want something different than something that's geared for parents and caregivers. So similar, they can access digital tools that they can use. They can access even a moderated peer community, and I'll emphasize the word moderated. They said they didn't want another social media platform, but they wanted a space to connect and to talk. And so those messages get reviewed by professionals, and if they're safe, if they're appropriate, they end up on this platform and they can have a conversation in a community there. But the real benefit, I think, is also access to a coach, where you can drop in, right, as a teen and get support up to 9 o'clock at night. So maybe you had a rough conversation with your family at dinner. You can now connect with a professional that evening and get some support if you need it. And if the support that's provided, which is it's considered subclinical, so these are professionals who are trained, but they're not licensed providers. They're supervised by licensed providers. But if you need extra support, they're also going to help navigate you to the resources that are available in your community as well. And so that's a little bit about what's happening in the digital space as a result of this initiative. And the final pieces I'll mention is that all of this is only going to make a difference if you feel like you're worth it, right? Like if you feel like you can access some of these services and supports. And so we have a number of statewide campaigns that I would love for all of you to engage in. This one is called Never a Bother, and this one is focused specifically on suicide prevention. And what the youth told us is they said, please talk about suicide. For 15 to 24-year-olds, it kills more people than cancer, right? But they said, do so with hope. Do so with resilience, right? And you can see the color scheme here and the design. And they said the number one issue that we have when it comes to this topic is that we feel like we're burdening other people who already have so much going on in their lives. And so therein is the tagline, never a bother, because we want everyone to know that they're never a bother. And just a couple weeks ago on World Mental Health Day, we were excited to launch a partnership with Megan Thee Stallion, who is promoting a lot of this work, including the 988 line. So to build on the great work that Senator Portantino mentioned, on the back of student IDs is 988. This is a great place to learn what happens when you call, right? Youth themselves are giving testimonials of the support they've gotten through that work. So I think you've certainly saved lives with that initiative, and hopefully this helps complement and augment it going forward. And then the final one that I'll mention is a campaign on adverse childhood experiences, on ACEs. Raise your hand in this room if you're familiar with that term. Yeah, so that's what I thought. The majority of folks are aware that what happened to you before age 18, 10 specific criteria, can have a lifelong impact on your well-being and your physical health. We're talking higher rates of chronic diseases as well. And the goal of this initiative is to take that language out of spaces like this and into the hands of young people themselves, so they understand that science, and as this tagline says, that they can live beyond it, right? There's great science that says there are ways to mitigate the impact of ACEs and different stress busting techniques. So on this campaign page, I won't scroll through it now, but you can learn about stories of Californians who've experienced ACEs and the ways that they are coping, the ways that they are supporting themselves, and the ways that they are healing themselves. So with that, I will close. If you want to learn more about the initiative overall, again, it's called the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, CYBHI. I apologize for the acronyms. We're professional acronym developers at the state. But in particular, I'll just highlight on this Our Impact page, you can see a little bit of the stories of change that's happening, as well as toward the bottom half of the page here, you can search for organizations that have been funded, for different awardees, and for different events that are happening in your specific community and county. Okay. So I hope you have hope. I have hope in particular because of the young people that I talk to every day. I have the pleasure of doing that. And I just really want to thank everybody for coming together here on a Saturday morning to come talk about this important issue. So thank you.
We have time for questions, so if anybody has any questions, we have a question there. Stand up. If you want to. Is that a question? No, but that's okay. But we'll comment.
I'll just echo that. I think one of the big myths we have in society that parenting is just this natural gift and that you know it instinctively. And that's totally false, right? Oftentimes we learn it through a culture and through community, but we also know some folks don't have that, or some folks need the additional support. So through the initiative, a couple things are happening. One is I would go back actually to that Bright Life Kids app. That is for kids ages 0 to 12. So if 0 through 3, 0 to 5, that's really mainly for the parent to help coach them through parenting. And that's for everybody. And then also in specific communities, we are working with First 5 organizations and with other organizations to scale positive parenting programs. There's another program called Effective Black Parenting Program. So there's a number of evidence-based ways to support parenting, and we're trying to scale those and expand those as well.
Thanks. And I was just going to say, one of my biggest challenges as a dad is I think about my relationship with my mother and how I interacted with her, but my two daughters are very different than I am, and they're different from each other. And sometimes I project how I would do things if I were them, and I compare it to how they do things. And I always have to try to step back to recognize that each of them is totally different, and the dynamic is totally different. And it's almost like I need a different manual with each kid in each circumstance from what I remember as a kid. So that's something to step back. I saw Mr. Tarkovsky had his hand up first, and then we'll come over here, and then we'll come over here.
I want to thank you for putting this together and thank the governor for this incredible initiative.
Absolutely.
You're from the Surgeon General's office or which office?
The California Health and Human Services Agency. Yeah.
Question.
Yes, the question is the governor and Senator Portantino will be 140 years old by the time school districts take advantage of this effort. And I'm wondering why school districts that could be using CYBHI two years after the authorization are still years away from getting services to children reimbursed at the school districts when superintendents are telling the senator, we're losing all of our federal funds. This brilliant program of the governor's would help school districts from Mexico to Oregon. Can you
Talk about the implementation.
steroids or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say it is unprecedented change in terms of the reform that we're talking about here. So we're asking schools to collect student insurance information, to work with a third party on billing services, and this is a work in progress. The way we designed this was to learn alongside with schools. So in January of this year, we launched a pilot cohort, which is a learning cohort with 47 school districts in the state that said we're willing to learn with you. And we've learned a lot through that 6 months of working with them. And then in July of this year, we launched a second cohort, which is an additional about 90 or so school districts. In January of 2025, it's going to open up even broader. So it's a slow and phased process of implementing it so that we can iron out all of the implementation kinks to make sure it rolls out correctly. But working with all 58 county offices of education and providing them with funding to help work through the administrative reforms that need to happen for this to occur.
Well, I would also say you help one kid, you help one kid. And so, we have to make sure that we try to roll this out as quickly as possible and help as many kids as possible, and that's the intent behind it. There's always going to be implementation challenges when you have a state of 40 million people and, 1,500 school districts. So, the goal is laudable, the intent is laudable, the financing behind it, so we're doing the best we can. A question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. In terms of social emotional learning, is there funding specifically for that or mandates specifically?
It's in that program.
Yeah, hold on. Go ahead.
Funding, yes. So working with all 58 county offices of education. The leads for those are Sacramento County Office of Education, who's working with all of the other partners to help scale and create these communities of practice that they are funded to do. Mandates to change actually what's being taught in classrooms is a different matter altogether that takes legislation to actually create, and Senator Portantino can talk through the processes about that. So this is about encouragement, and it's also much more of a framework of teaching than specific curricular content.
And if somebody had a specific question, they should go to the Sacramento office. Where would they go? If you're a local school district here, where would you go to get the most up-to-date information on social emotional learning? What would be the phone call you would make?
Let's see if I can find that website right now, but I believe it's calhopesel.org. Calhopesel.org. Let's hope I get it right. All right, I did, yes. So this is the website to learn more, and there's contact information and other pieces about here, and it's done in partnership with Sacramento County.
Thank you. We'll go here, and then we'll come here. Questions, not comments, questions.
Yeah, Senator, I guess this question is kind of alongside your question in terms of mandates. One of the things that we know is that schools are subcontracting services, mental health services into the school settings. Unfortunately, oftentimes what we're bringing in as services are not fully equipped, and so families are often checking the box. My child goes to therapy, my child receives services, but they're actually not targeting some of these ACE-related issues. And so, is there any anything down the pipeline that's gonna mandate, I'm a psychotherapist who went through an entire education, rarely to be taught about trauma. Only to learn about ACEs way later when I said, what is this thing? So could we get some legislation that is going to really mandate when therapists, coaches are being educated, that is actually teaching them about the impact of developmental trauma, of ACEs, how they manifest. I think this is really important because then families don't say, my child's going to be
So as part of their degree program, as part of their,
yeah, absolutely, part of the mandate before an actual mental health professional graduates and receives, the degree that's gonna be hung on their wall, that says, I know about developmental trauma, I know about ACEs.
I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I mean, I'll say I think it's an important question. I don't know quite the details on the accreditation processes for various degree programs, but I think that's the space where those criteria are set. And then I'll also add, there's one thing where it's in paper and there's another thing with how it's taught, right? And so I know our Department of Healthcare Access and Information does work with universities and training programs to try to provide the most robust and comprehensive support possible for that.
All right, we're going to take 3 more questions. We got one here, we'll go here, and then back there, and then if there's short questions, I'll take a 4th one.
Thank you again. PUSD, Pasadena Unified, is a district that is expanding its community schools framework. Do you see efficiencies in implementation and fidelity through that framework?
Yeah, it's a great point. So for everyone, there's a separate $4 billion initiative from the state to rethink the way schools are structured in a way that supports community schools. Part of that is a pillar about integrating supports, right? And some of those supports are connecting with behavioral health providers in the community. And through this program that I talked about changing the way insurance covers those programs, it includes community providers that provide services in schools. So that's the link between the two there.
Go all the way to the back, and then we'll come to you. Yeah, you, Octavia.
Going back to the parenting aspect, it's been a while since I've had sort of a well baby visit. What's happening in 2024 and beyond in terms of pediatrician parent contact and addressing mental health related issues?
Yeah, thanks for raising that. It's one of the aspects of the initiative I didn't talk about. Babies see the doctor on average 12 times in the first 3 years of life. Most parents don't see a doctor that often, right? And babies don't go to the hospitals alone. So through Medi-Cal, we've changed an additional coverage benefit so that the parent or the caregiver can get services under the child's insurance, essentially. It's called dyadic services, a dyadic benefit, and dyad just means pair, so it's the parent and the caregiver and the child. And we're really working with various healthcare providers throughout the state so that they are aware and able to use this benefit to provide services to the parent in the pediatrician's office.
Great. We'll come right here.
So as a follow-up question to hers, I wanted to know who are the governing bodies that approve services that come into schools that are supposed to help the children who are on the either side of the normal bell curve. So I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with somebody who provides services to children who need extra support within the LAUSD arena, and speaking to her, she's the owner, the boss of these services. Speaking to her after an hour, we were able to identify that the people actually that go onto the ground to support these children are not fully qualified themselves because of the minimum hour of wage that brings them into these jobs. That's one. And then the second thing is they do not understand trauma themselves, and they are almost sometimes young. 3, if they're old enough, it becomes a labor of love where the money given to them is not sustainable to have a living. And the minimum training that they need to receive to go into schools is not enough. So that's my question. Who are the governing bodies that approve the money spent on those programs and people?
I'll comment on one piece of it is the need is so great that we do need more healthcare providers. I mean, we need more people trained, licensed, doing this work. And as the doctor said, we're trying to encourage more people to get involved. The state has got outreach initiatives. We're trying to draw more people in. Of course, there's a lag time between when you show up for your first day of class and when you actually get your license. And so we're trying to create more in the pipeline. As far as the actual accreditation, I don't know if you want to.
I'd probably point you toward two areas. One is that any healthcare provider is practicing either on their license or under the supervision of someone who's licensed, right? So in terms of the quality, or if you've got concerns of their services, there are various licensing boards that you can mention. The other one is, and I don't know if you know more, but the schools themselves have a lot of control over, who they invite onto their campuses and what that looks like. So whether that's the school board or the administration that works with the school, sometimes the relationships happen at that level as well.
We'll take two quick questions because we want to stay on schedule. So go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if there's any thought of bringing children back to the idea of thankfulness to God. I was a kindergartner at Abraham Lincoln Elementary School here in Pasadena, which no longer exists. But we learned to say a little prayer. Thank you for the world so sweet. Thank you for the food we eat. Thank you for the birds that sing. Thank you, God, for everything. And I hope and pray the children will learn again to be thankful to God for all the good things they're given.
Thank you for your comment. We'll come back there.
Is there anything coming down the line for faith-based people? I know they need training and stuff, but I know the kids are in school a lot. But you need something that's like a stigma. No one wants to talk about it. So you have any suggestions how we could reach that level?
I don't think the state makes any distinction for nonprofits, whether they're faith-based. There's no negativity around either type, a faith-based program. It's all, nonprofits are all treated the same way.
I would agree, and I would say, the campaigns that I talked about, the suicide prevention campaign, the idea of increasing awareness of ACEs, we want everyone to spread those messages. The safe spaces training that I talked about, and I did talk about it primarily in the context of school, it's free and it's online, and really it can be for everyone. So if you're working, and that has 3 separate modules, 0 to 5, 5 to 11, and 12 to 18-year-olds. But if a faith-based organization wanted to train their staff in terms of how to use those messages of understanding stress and talking about creating safe, stable, nurturing relationships, it's welcomed, absolutely. We're working with after-school networks as well for the same purpose.
All right, we'll go one last question. Hope it's a short one.
So I run a nonprofit that offers mental health services, long-term quality psychotherapy to low-income individuals. And we've recently partnered with schools who need more than their counseling department can. So is there any avenue for funding for services like ours? Because that's been a challenge because
Separate from the schools or through the schools? Yeah.
so we do have a few community partners that we work with that will help fund it. But that has been an issue for us is to figure out how to offer these services without having to ask the people that don't have the funding.
So right now, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, most of the funding comes directly to the schools, and then the schools will then contract with you to.
One of our community partners,
But I'm just saying, so schools are getting money to pay for this services, and they're deciding how they're spending it. But go ahead.
well, that's not happening in this situation. They are funded, so Young Eisner Scholars is a nonprofit that has money to support some marginalized kids that are in district schools. They pay for our services for those particular kids. But then we're on campus and other kids are like, well, I want therapy. And it would be great if the schools could fund that for any of the children that can.
Yeah, I can speak to it a little bit. So the program that I talked about that changes the way insurance is mandated to cover services, it's called the CYBHI fee schedule program. And it sets a specific set of services, a specific set of practitioners who can provide those services for a specific rate, so for a specific amount of funding. The schools are essentially the locus of control who helps decide who within their network can provide those services, but that includes community partners. And so the funding will come from the care plans, right? The people we entrust to pay for healthcare, either directly in a school-linked manner to community organizations, or if the school is providing those services, the school themselves can receive funding. So we didn't come up with a one-size-fits-all model because we know in some schools they are providing services directly, and in other places community providers, such as yourself, are providing those services. Both of those are part of this program. Yeah, I would say speak with either your county, like the Los Angeles County Office of Education, or the specific school district that you're working with, to unpack that a little bit further.
Right. So we want to stay on schedule, and you're going to be around, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Sood will be here after the program, so if you didn't get your question answered, or if we have time at the end, we'll come back to more questions, but I do want to stay on schedule. So I apologize because the questions are all great, and we're not going to deal with everything we want to deal with in 2 hours this morning, which means, again, underscores just how serious this issue is and how earnest you all are to be involved. So our next panel is our youth panel discussion. So obviously when we talk about youth behavioral health, mental health, we want to hear from the youth, right? And so joining me this morning for the panel are members of the LA Suicide Prevention Network Youth Advocacy Board. Last year, the advisory board, we had a very robust conversation in my office, which I think is somewhere available out there in the internet. You can go watch it. We wanted to destigmatize mental health, and so come on up. If our panelists could come join us, come on up, take your seats. Let's give them a big round, and let's give Dr. Sood a big round of applause as well for being here. And so we have Leslie is a dedicated youth mental health advocate and cultural community organizer from Mid-City Los Angeles with deep roots in the I never can say that word, community. She's passionate about amplifying voices. We have Brittany is serving her second year as a liaison for the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Network. We have Amy as a queer Latina from Jackson Heights, who's here to talk about all kinds of great things. She's got a bachelor's degree from Syracuse. And we have Natalie is a board member and director of creative and community at Girl Gang Crazy, which is a 501c3. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves and then tell us your reason for joining the LA Suicide Prevention Network. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Flores. I am a first-generation Latina, currently working to get my master's this December at Pepperdine in psychology. I hope to continue doing my career in a PsyD program in clinical forensic psychology, working with children and adolescents, and my working with LASPN Youth Advisory Board stemmed from my own struggles at 15 years old when I attended a LAUSD school and was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and saw the challenges firsthand of dealing with that and getting services.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Melendez. I am a first-gen Salvadorian, and my family lost an uncle to suicide very early on, and so in addition to being Salvadorian, I'm also the eldest daughter in my family. It's a very important point. And I've seen the way that my family has chosen to not confront their emotions for the sake of survival. And there was no time to be sad or linger in grief, and so they had to stay strong and provide for their family. So I'm here to kind of change the narrative.
Hi, good morning. My name is Amy Kichis. First, I want to say that if folks are moving around, if you guys need to go outside, please free to do that as you hear our stories. We won't take it personally. We just want you guys to take care of yourselves. So my name is Amy, and I'm from Queens, New York. I'm Colombian and Latina. I'm Colombian and Peruvian. Sorry, I'm clearly excited to be Latina. And I got my undergrad in Women's and Gender Studies and Sociology, and my master's at American University in International Affairs. And I'm here because I have been diagnosed a year ago with borderline personality disorder. And before that, I have gone through a huge wave of ups and downs with my family, with my community, how I have been treated or how I have treated others. And if you don't know, young people that do have BPD, the suicide rate is 70% of people that have BPD have tried to commit suicide. And I am in that statistics. And I have seen how young people in my family now are still continuing to have that generational trauma. And as an adult sexuality educator, former adult sexuality educator and former youth program manager with Planned Parenthood, I have seen how all of our societal outdoor, like societal communities and inner communities have affected young people still today. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Leslie. I am a youth mental health advocate. I was born and raised in LA. I grew up in a Oaxacan community, so I love my Oaxacans. I'm a first-gen Latina, also first in my family to really acknowledge my mental health struggles that I'm dealing with. I currently work at Covenant House, California. Oh, can you guys hear me? Hello, hello, okay. Hey, I currently work at Covenant House, California, working with young adults ages 18 to 24. I help youth really navigate through problem solving and getting evicted. So I focus on two programs, just really helping youth navigate through difficult times and also helping any youth who are about to get evicted, help them pay off their rental arrears and get them connected to legal service and really preventing them from becoming homeless. But a lot of my work and the everyday work that I see is all aligns to mental health. A lot of it and the connection to housing and mental health. I've seen it in my past years that I've been working, and I'm extremely passionate about creating safe spaces for young adults.
Well, thank you. Let's give it up for our panel. You all touched upon it a little bit, but, drill down, what fuels your advocacy for mental health? What drives you all?
So, based on my personal experience as a first generation Latina of a single parent who immigrated, and who immigrated from Mexico, thank you. I saw firsthand the struggles of being an immigrant through my mom, who had to work day and night for me. And so on top of that, I knew that there was mental health struggles along with those connections. And so going into a low-income school in East Los Angeles, it was pretty evident to see that there's a lot of mental health struggles and lack of services. And so definitely through my experience, I ended up taking lead and began a club in my school and began to advocate for myself and my peers. So yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I think for myself, it's really, not to say it's coming from a selfish perspective, right? But I'm just trying to be the person that I wished I would have had when I was younger. And so it's more so of, you deal with grief at a young age, and it's an immigrant family, and everybody's trying to learn to navigate, right? There's this thing that people say now where it's like, it's their first time living too. So they're just trying to figure out how to cope with a loss so tragic as suicide. And so, I think being a child at that time, I think I was about 9 to 11, I think you kind of assume that children don't feel the weight of grief or don't, necessarily confront just the tragedy, But I think being the oldest, I say that as an important detail because I was my mom's confidant. So I was practically in her mind, hearing all the dark thoughts or hearing how she was going through it. And, not to say that I hold anything against her, but it's more so of like, we're trying to navigate this together. And so I think that I'm trying to create a safer space for my siblings. I have 2 younger siblings, for anybody else that comes in my family, for every other Black and brown kid in communities. And so, yeah.
Let me do a follow-up real quick. So would you say there's more pressure on the oldest child in your family dynamic than the baby of the family?
Oh, 1,000%.
1,000%. Who agrees with that? I happen to be the baby of 4.
Oh.
We have unique challenges as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But I will just say my older brother's penmanship is perfect, and mine isn't.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I
we
was
walked
able
so
to
you
get
could
away
run.
with that. But no, I definitely agree that, especially within an immigrant family, we just see that with language barriers, we see there are families where the parents don't speak English and the kids have to be the translators. And again, it falls largely on the oldest child to navigate so much. So thank you for sharing that. You want to share what drives you?
Yeah, so I would say, of course, like these lovely ladies said, their firsthand experience. So having mental health issues in a Latinx household was not easy. My parents didn't believe in therapy at all until I grew a bit older and went to college and had my first attempt. And then they're like, oh, we believe you now. And it shouldn't have gotten to that point, right? And once I became an adult sexuality educator and I had the privilege of speaking to parents and give them classes about how to talk to their children about either their queer experience, like their kids' queer experiences, them coming out, all of these different events that can happen in a kid's life. That's when I realized, well, I've realized a long time ago, but that's when it truly realized like this, it takes a community. It takes not just talking to young people, but it takes also talking to adults about how to parent, right? Like Senator said, and also overall just validating kids and validating their experiences, and not just saying you're young, this is a phase. And I think that mental health is just so much more crucial than just talking about depression, anxiety. It's about actual disorders that can lead on because of the trauma that they have gone through before the age of 18. So it really is, it is really crucial to see all of those signs before people's frontal lobes develop, right? So yeah, that's what fuels me.
I think for myself, I grew up in a single household. My mom was undocumented growing her whole life. So for us, fear was very much instilled in my upbringing. So asking for help, that's what helps me want to feel my passion, right? Shifting away from a scarcity mindset and generational healing. And I think just us being here today and just walking in here, you guys are taking the step forward that direction, and I'm really happy about that. But I work with 18 to 24-year-olds, and I think our society has failed our young adults by saying that 18 is an adult age or legal age. That is no, that isn't true. I see it every day. I've seen it through my own experiences, but I also see it through the youth that I work with. 18 to 24 is when we need help. We need our community. We need people to show up for us and show love. And in my everyday, I show up for my youth, and that's what I'm here for them. I'm here for them and myself and my younger self and my little cousins.
I just want to resonate Leslie's sentiment with, saying that everybody in this room is also here for a better future. I think, like, even just hearing the questions that y'all had, I think it's really amazing and inspiring to see y'all here on a Saturday morning trying to improve in your own communities. But we have a question for you, Senator Portantino. In your experience, what role do young people play in shaping the policies that affect them? How do you involve young constituents in the legislative process to ensure their voices are heard and reflected in your policy decisions?
Well, it's a great question, and I have to say, I think we as policy leaders need to do a better job, I think, of incorporating younger voices. Obviously, we're here today hearing from you, but I think we just need to do better. What I do is, obviously, we have our internship program where we value our interns. They're not just running around taking photos. They're working on policy and pitching policy, and I think, that's important for us to hear. I run a lot of issues by my daughters. And I'm constantly calling them on the phone saying, hey, there's a bill doing this. What do you think of this? Oftentimes, I get a lot of insight from them. And I just think it's incumbent upon all of us to stop, ask our kids what they're thinking, ask their peers what they're thinking. If you're a policymaker in a leadership position, make sure you have an avenue to hear those younger voices, not just from a performative perspective, but to literally drill down on what the young people are offering, because, you know, it's their lives, it's their future. And, you know, we have a situation where 2 out of 5 teenagers think about suicide. 3 out of 5 LGBT teenagers think about suicide. I mean, that was not the case 20 years ago. So we have to recognize that we have to bring them into this conversation because it's their future. And so I challenge everybody to have a window into your world, into your leadership, into your situation. When I was elected to the city council in 1999, the first proposal I brought to the council was to create a youth commission, to have equal standing with our public works, our public safety commission. And so that commission advises the city council since 1998, again, to bring those voices into the conversation. So thank you for the question.
Great answer.
We're going to take questions after. We're going to take questions after, I know. So our next question is, in your experience, what are the biggest challenges facing your generation impacting behavioral health issues? And what do you want to tell us that we should do better to support you? So what are your challenges, and then what challenges do you have for us to do better? Who wants to take that?
Hi, y'all. So I have a lot to say on this. I think, honestly, the first thing it starts at home. The change starts at home, the conversations with our parents. I think about this a lot. I recently started talking more to my mom, and she didn't really understand that she had a really bad accident and lost her job, but what she was experiencing was anxieties. And I was trying to talk to her about that and the importance of acknowledging that she's also dealing with her mental health. So conversations at home, conversations with the family, I know that's been a big thing for myself. In my family, I am always having an open conversations with my little cousin, making sure that they know how loved they are and how much support I'm able to give. That was something I wish I had growing up. I think really just shifting away, like when I think about at work, when we have a crisis, like who do we call? Like oftentimes when we call the police officers, they're not the most adequate in navigating certain situations, right? So we have to think about how do we bring community, how do we start training our people to be more trauma informed, how to go through emotions. You know, people are going through their own thing and we can't criminalize their emotions. I also think just in the past 2 years, like I've seen a lot, the disconnection of high school youth to shelters or housing. We don't really have a lot of resources when it comes to youth who need support in high school with housing. So I think just building the pipeline, the bridge from high schools to actual community-based solutions, programs, and just any kind of support. I also think that education and just investing in more culturally appropriate BIPOC service providers. So really, Western solution or approaches isn't the only way. Indigenous perspective community, you know, in my community, Oaxacan community, there's a form of healing as well, but we have to be open just outside of the Western perspective. So I think as well, like when we think about that, how do we create grants and incentives for BIPOC service providers? How do we support them to want to become service providers? Because oftentimes a lot of my Black and brown peers who do want to be a therapist it's underpaid. It's underpaid if you want to go in the public sector, you want to go to nonprofit route, it is underpaid. And oftentimes like we have to like pay rent, we have to meet ends meet. And so we start creating these incentives and really creating mentorship programs. I think that would be a really great way to help promote that within our communities.
So my nephew currently lives with me, and he's 17 years old. And I see a repeated cycle that I thought wouldn't happen to him because I was like, his mom is younger and she'll do a greater job and she's doing the best that she can. But when I realized when he came to me and he started having a lot of the similar issues, I realized it's not about age, but it's about how the person is healing and chooses to heal. I recently went to Barcelona for the first time, well, for the second, whatever, that doesn't matter. And I met my cousin, and I was the first person that she came out to, and she was 15 at the time I met her. And it's so wild to know that her parents are right there, but she felt so comfortable to tell me as her queer cousin. And it was the first time she felt so seen. And I say that because it's not, if you're an aunt, if you're an uncle, if you're a close member and you're far away from a young person, just know that you can still help and be a part of that child's life, because their parents might not be the best person that that young person can go to. And even when kids, younger queer kids come out, and I know that, you know, in the new generation, we're like, yay, like queer rights, and everyone's so supportive. At the end of the day, like, how are you showing up for that queer young person? And I say this because when I came out, it was an awful experience. It was horrible. My mom shut me down and gave me a Bible, and I was like, I go to church more than you. Like, my dad was like, I hope your kids don't come out as communist as you are. And it was just awful. And I say this because then their perspective changed, but I wish it was more like right away, of course. But then obviously, like, through time, my dad took me to my first Pride parade, and it was really sweet. So I'm just like, show up for the young kids that are in your life or that are so far. And when it comes to these challenges, I think I also would say that it's not just about the community that's like around them, but I also would say like the expectations of relationships with these kids. Like, they don't know how to stable relationships. Like, sometimes they see their parents as just parents, but like Natalie said, like, you're also people and you're also trying to figure it out. Well, they're also kids and they're gonna be people. So like, seeing them as people and not just your children are a part of you. And I say this like coming from like a narcissist mother. They're kids that are more than just an extension of you. And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that you see when you're having dialogue with parents and children, which that's what like I have my experience in. And I see a lot of conversations about, but you're my child, and they have this expectation for them. But they're their own people at the end of the day.
And I'll answer as well. This is more speaking on the stance of, I know I mentioned I'm currently working on my master's in psychology, and that really stemmed my interest from my personal challenges in mental health. But I think the biggest challenge for me in this generation, especially impacting my mental health, has been starting in grad school. There is still a lot of barriers for underserved communities who do want to do the work. We often are faced with loans, and people get scared because of that. And I've also had my share of, can I even do this? And we want people to look like us in those spaces. And there's a big gap when it comes to workforce and education. We have grad students that have to devote practicum hours that don't get paid, but expect to still survive, but still expect to also show up as a representation we need. So I think there's a lack of that, and that becomes the biggest challenge for at least underserved communities who want to be a part of that. And I think that goes back to legislation.
I talk to young people all the time, and I get ideas from them all the time. And, you know, we have to just do better jobs. I think not just talking, but listening. You know, a lot of times adults like to lecture and talk at. And I think we have to just be more receptive and more open. And so that's what I try to do as a legislator. And hopefully, you know, people see that there's a benefit to getting those perspectives. I mean, again, 2 of my successful bills were ideas that came from teenagers. And I think and I promote them so other teenagers feel empowered. And by the way, you can do this, right? They all can do it, right? So, and then I'm going to combine our last two questions. What steps individually as youth board members to deal with the stigma? So what can we do to destigmatize mental health? That's the first part of the question. But then what do you feel stressed and overwhelmed about? Could you share some things for all of us advice to help us manage our stress? Compare your techniques of how you deal with it, educate us. So tell us about how we destigmatize behavioral health, and then go into what advice do you have for us to deal with our stress that ties to your personal experiences.
I think we're literally just plants trying to grow, and I think that everything goes back to the root. So I think even us going to therapy and taking the steps and doing it and speaking about it at home, even that, you already get looked at like you're crazy, right? And so when you do that, you're initiating those conversations, you're breaking that behavioral pattern for them to start thinking, it's okay to seek help. I will also say that I think all the amazing resources that I've heard today, I will never hear them if I wasn't in this room. I think that we need to do a better job at sharing those and pouring those into different communities and having them, like the same way that things go viral. Like, I would love that to go viral, I would love to know about those resources. Never a bother. I only learned about that campaign through this program. And so I think that these are literally every single program. They are all helpful. I could think of 3 family members for each program. So I think it's just a matter of spreading it like wildfire, and like everybody in here is down for the work. And there's, this thing that we say when you're protesting, it's la lucha sigue, and it's the fight continues. And so, I just hope that we all continue to play our part and improving the future for everybody, Yeah.
And to talk a little bit of our youth advisory board, I am a liaison along with Irma Rosa. We work with youth from 16 to 24 years old, and we just started our new cohort this year. And so we're really excited to bring in this variety of different youth throughout all LA County. We have people from different walks of life, different cultural backgrounds, and our ability to erase the stigma really goes into healing, and really the arts and changing the narrative of just language, just changing committing to suicide to die by suicide. We know that there's a lot of statistics out there, and it's overwhelming for our youth to even just hear about this till this day. And so in terms of doing that work to erase the stigma, we put our youth through some trainings and workshops. They receive about 6 workshops the first half of our cohort, and then once they receive those, they go into the communities and do outreach through tabling, through media, through documentary series, podcasts, whatever they would like to do. We support them and try to express their concerns about their mental health experiences, but also how to continue to have the conversation.
I think for me, I just really shifting from shame to being open for help, asking for help. I think we often feel shame when it comes to help, especially when it comes to mental health. Creating safe spaces for youth, and I in the past year have been advocating for creative spaces for youth. One of the things that I've been doing a lot, that I've noticed, talking is not everyone's form. Everyone has a different way of communicating, and we have to be more adaptable to and being open to other people's form of communication. And for me, this past year, I know a lot of the young adults and youth that I've been working with, music has been a really big thing for them. So healing through music and providing these spaces for them to be open to creative and touch their creative side. But yeah, and then answering the question, I think you had asked also about us being overwhelmed. When I feel stressed, I work out. I really do work out. It's really fun. I really got into it, and I bike a lot. So those are kind of my things that I do. And I started reading and journaling a lot more. I think before I was just like, oh, like I kind of just started taking it seriously, and I was like, oh, this wasn't really a thing. But reflection is such a great thing for us to grow and just really hold ourselves accountable and hold our people accountable. But those are the simple things that I do.
And I would say, like, we're all in the mental health fields, so I'll just share like what I do when I feel stressed. I think something that has been really important from my psychiatrist is learning DBT skills, and that means there's different ways of you connecting with your brain, your senses of what you can do in a moment of stress. I think that practicing how you're gonna take care of yourself when you're not stressed is important, because then you can start practicing that and get more comfortable with those skills once you are in a position of heat. So I love to craft every day, coloring every day. I'm like, I would literally feel wild if I don't like sit down and color a page a day. And on a more serious note, I think we do need to erase the stigmas around medication for mental health. So I take Lexapro every day, and while that doesn't help my BPD, it does help my levels of depression. And that's something that my parents didn't understand and that they shamed me for, and that they tried to take me out of it. And they're like, don't use it for a long time. Like, it's not good for you. But they're not doctors. They don't know what's going on. And if it's good for me and if it's good for the young people in your life, then that's what works. And we need to, just like we share our little routines, like every day I'll be like, what medication are you on? Ow, like that's cute. Like I love that for you. So normalizing that is really important too.
How about this panel? Let's, Amy, Natalie, Leslie, and Brittany, I learned a lot, and I just the respect for you all, what you're doing, the challenges you've had in your life, the fact that you're just giving so much help to other people. And, you know, I always come back to this idea that, you know, everybody wants to make a big splash, but you help one person every day, right? You help another person, and that person helps another person, and that person helps another person. I also think your observations about all those resources, you know, we're all here. We got the message. We have to make sure, for those of you who have e-blasts and social media and platforms, take these resources, share them with as many people as possible. This program, these 4 terrific people, it's been videotaped. It's going to be available. You know, make your peers sit and watch it and learn. And, you know, we all have to be ambassadors. We all have to share our personal stories. We all have to share the resources out there, because if we don't, we know there'll be a consequence. The other side of the question is we never know that person whose life was saved, right? We don't know. But we have to feel comfortable and confident knowing that the collective efforts are going to help somebody, are going to save a life. We just don't know who it is. And that's the beauty of the effort that you're putting out there, is you know you're helping somebody and you're sharing your personal story. So one more time, let's give them a big round of applause. And then I have one hard question for you. So when Peru plays Colombia in soccer, who do you root for?
Colombia.
Colombia. All right. Just wanted to get that on the record as well.
There you go.
All right. Thank you very much. I hate to say we don't have time for. I know you want to do a question, and we'll take a couple. We're just going to go a little late. They're just too good not to. But a question, not comments.
Who are your mentors that are older than you? My research shows that the younger population understands the stuff really well. It's really the parents, it's my generation that need the understanding. So who is your community in that age group?
The older mentors you're talking about.
So since I started working voluntarily through the mental health department. I've met a few folks who look like me and who had degrees like myself that I hope to have. For here, we have Dr. Daisy Gomez, who's one of our mentors and co-chairs for the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Network. We have more folks behind the scenes who've actually guided me, and like Dr. Gomez has guided me through also like my career path. Just having those people around. Also in school, just simply having professors who actually, you know, check in with us and tell us, how do you feel about the assignments coming up? How are you managing the stress? I know finals are coming up. That goes a long way than a professor who just expects a lot of assignments out of you in any level of education, whether it's K through 12, whether it's undergrad or graduate school.
One more, you can go.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think mentorship is incredibly important. Thank you for asking that question. I have a couple mentors, but my first ever experience with mentorship was through a program called Creative Futures that invests really like programming for up and coming artists who come from communities and really get them into Soho House. So I had my mentorship there. I have a mentor. Her name is Antoinette. She's doing amazing things in the community, teaching me a lot about how to really brand myself. These are things that we're not taught, right? What it is to run a business. A second person I'd like to highlight is my boss, Anthony Conley. He is one of my closest mentors I've had, and he has shown me how to show up for people and truly care, and what empathy means and what community means, and really showing up for every day. So I think our values really aligned, but having these two people really, really helped me narrow down my goals in life and what I want to do. And I think everybody, especially like our youth, should have access to mentorship programs.
Great. We have one more question here. A question, not a statement. All right.
Incredibly intelligent. Thank you. I'm looking at 4 intelligently well-groomed and educated women, brown women. And what strikes me is that you have advanced degrees. You have more than a bachelor's degree. There are cultural challenges to making those types of accomplishments. And I would like to hear how you believe you have overcome those challenges in order to get to where you are today and where you're going.
It's a good question.
Your answers can be models for those who are listening.
Thank you for your question and your comments. I would say that community is really important, straight up. I think I remember my dad taking school very seriously. I think that was the one thing that he really wanted me to do since he migrated to Peru and had nothing. And he was like, you're going to go to school. But then when I did my master's, that was for myself, because my parents didn't force me to do my master's. It was me, but it was also because of all of the amazing women that I had around me, challenged me and pushing me to fight for women's rights. And now I'm applying to my doctorates to do women's and gender studies. So, and I didn't get there alone. So I would say that it really is about fighting imposter syndrome, right? Not letting white people tell me that I'm not good enough, getting a white man's salary, and yeah, like just not hearing those voices and keep moving forward.
Anybody else jump in?
I resonate that sentiment. I love that question so much. I think that your question was, how did you face these challenges to succeed? I actually think my answer is opposite. So I went to college, I did my undergrad because my family was like, you have to be a lawyer. So I majored in political science, I did all the things, and through that, I think when you come out on the other end of that crazy journey, I think I had to sit down with myself and be like, well, what do I want to do? And it's work with women that have, domestic violence, with their kids. And so I think you find different avenues for community, but I think that community will always be the answer. Working with Girl Gang Crazy, which is a nonprofit based in South Central, which, as we know, South Central is a community that's very Black and brown. So I think that these people hold you. And to go back to that mentor question, like, I think that these women that I was introduced to that are 30 and older, I think that they've expanded my world that was once so small, because, you know, these families are scared. But once you break through that fear, you're limitless.
I could listen to them all day. Anyone else have a question? So, yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you for sharing your experiences and vulnerabilities, at the same time embracing your strength. My question is, she asked about how you overcame all the struggles, but how can you advocate for our youth that actually cannot speak for themselves because of fear of being judged? And I know that in high school, for example, they face a lot of stress, like academics. And it's not just one demographic. We have to remember that also boys and men also go through that phase. So how can we advocate and openly talk this and educate parents as well at the same time? Thank you.
Go ahead, jump in.
Yes. So we're fortunate enough that this cohort, we have about 3 to 4 young men in our cohort. They are in high school, and so through them we get to hear experiences and listen in and try to help them in any capacity possible. I know LA County is large and we can't target every individual, but we welcome every individual, and if we can find resources through us directly, we guide them through other resources. And we've gotten great experiences and ideas from our young males in our group that want to provide those type of resources they're getting in our cohort into their schools. And so we're hoping by the second end of our cohort, we can provide them the resources so that they can bring that, either it's through pamphlets. A lot of them want to do magazine type handheld media where they get this information. So it's a small start, but we're starting there for sure. Yes.
Yeah, I think also what I've seen in my field of work is also that has been working is creating men support group. I think it's incredibly important to talk about emotions and being led by Black and brown men. I think that's something that we're trying to implement a lot more for the Tay youth that I work with, but I think it is important. Very random, sorry. A couple weeks back, I went to go see one of my favorite R&B artists, Sir, from Inglewood. He has a brother, D Smoke, rapper from Inglewood too. He talked about the importance of talking about emotions as a man coming from the hood. And I really resonated with that for our youth, because oftentimes our Black and brown youth aren't giving spaces to be soft, to really feel authentically. And I feel like we're often with toxic masculinity, and especially like in Latino, we have, machismo. We're very much individualized their experience, and I think now we're doing an amazing job of shifting that. And I think it's important to start supporting our men, our Black and brown men in our youth.
So let me do a follow-up. So do you think that there's part of the culture that says to young boys and young men, don't show your vulnerabilities, keep it inside? Do you think there's pressure? There's a reverse pressure that we have to overcome?
1000%. I think that I see it ruminating in my family now. I think when you aren't allowed to feel the emotions because of traditional beliefs that are kind of silently placed on you, I mean, I see it like you fall into other things like alcoholism, drugs, and I think that becomes an outlet, and it becomes so hard to get them out of there, So like, even just starting the conversations or having like safe spaces where like you just let your cousins cry, or the small things, really are what get you to that major point of starting the cycle to break out.
Thank you. And some of you touched a little bit upon arts education and arts outlets. What are your thoughts on, I mean, we hear about academic pressure on young people. Do you see a role for the arts and theater and other things as important?
Yes, 100%. We, in my field of work, again, have seen the impact that art and music has had on the youth mental health. Again, everyone has a different form of expressing, and we have to meet them where they're at. I think the way our schools are set up, it's very limiting to that in our creativity. Anytime budget cuts happen, what's the first program to go? Arts, music. I've seen it in my lifetime when I was in high school. That was the first thing that they were going to cut off. But it should be a priority. We should always be exercising our creative and be able to have creative opportunities. You know, oftentimes I think a lot of us touch on it. There's certain roles that our parents expect of us to be lawyers, doctors, but we never really see, or I think now we are seeing more of it, but just really investing in creative and endeavors and just really seeing them and helping guide our youth.
And I would like to add to that too. Me and my fiance were taking care of my nephew. He's 17 years old. And I was like, you have to read something, right? So he's been reading. And he's been reading Paradise Kiss, which is like this like little manga. And now he's like, I really want a sewing machine because it's about fashion. And he was like, oh, there's sewing machines in our school. He goes to Fairfax High School. And I was like, yeah, like you should ask if you can use them. But he's shy. But I emailed the school and I was like, hey, like, can my, so it's also about taking initiative, like as a guardian, as a parent, like if you hear your child, like, or you're the young person you're taking care of, like saying something that they want to do in arts, like motivating them, because they're going to sometimes be shy to ask. He wants to do acting. So we met up with some acting friends that I had, and they were like, oh, like you should do this youth program. And like having them around these people that are creative as well, because as Nat said, like her parents wanted her to be a lawyer. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. And when I went to school to be a doctor, and I gave them that call, and I was like, I'm going to do women's and gender studies degree. They were like, what the hell is that? Like, you need to, like it's teaching that your young people can also teach you about the importance of creativity.
I think that's a great, did anybody want to jump in? We're good. I was just going to say, young people can teach us. That's a great way to end this segment. Let's give it up for these four. I mean, thank you for sharing your stories. I had an ulterior motive on the arts question. It's for the school board members out there. I wanted you to hear from them, so don't cut those arts programs. I know the state doesn't make it easy, but we have Prop 28 now, exactly. So that's why we all voted yes. All right, we're going to move. Thank you very much. One more big round of applause. We're going to move on to our final panel. Thank you, guys. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, they are. For a healthy fee, they could come to your school. They don't do this, right? You guys, this is your only free Yes, you can take your names if you want. You'll get them after. All right. If Dr. Meza could come on up. So our final speaker is Dr. Jocelyn Meza. Dr. Meza is an assistant professor in residence in the Department of Psychiatry at UCLA. Currently, she is the Associate Director of Youth Stress and Mood Program and the Principal Investigator of the Health, Equity, and Access Research and Treatment Lab at UCLA. Her research interests include studying socio-ecological risk and protective factors for suicide and self-harming behaviors among Black and Latinx youth. She aims to integrate psychological, cognitive, and social cultural influences in her work, and she's a certified bilingual psychologist trained at UC Berkeley and UCSF in cognitive behavior, and she's smart. I'm just going to end there and turn it over to Dr. Meza. Thank you for being here.
try to keep this brief. I know you all want to go home. Is there a game today, a certain game that's happening today? No, there's no game. Oh, it's tomorrow. I see the Dodgers jersey, so I'm like, is that today? All right, while they set up the PowerPoint, I'll say a little bit about how inspired I feel by these wonderful ladies up here. I grew up in Mexico and I moved to the US when I was 14. And when I was in high school, I honestly had no idea what I was doing, but you know, I was in sports and I met this wonderful person. She was a counselor and she approached me and she said, do you want to go to college? You have a really high GPA. You're the captain of all the varsity sports. And I said, what's college? And she said, oh, we need to meet. She walked me through the application process, helped me complete my FAFSA, and I got into UCLA. And I loved being at UCLA. I was like, I'm a Bruin. At that time, I really didn't know what that meant, but I knew I was doing something right. And I started participating in research, and I really loved it. And at that time, a professor at UCLA said, do you want to go to grad school? And I was like, oh, shoot, there's more? Like, I was like, man, I feel like they just asked me that same question 4 years ago, and I said, what's grad school? So I ended up going to UC Berkeley for my PhD, and around my second year at Berkeley, when I had someone say, you know, what do you want to be? And I said, I want to be a professor. And they looked at me like, well, it's going to be really hard. And I was also very specific. I said, I want to be a professor at UCLA. They're like, it's really hard to be a professor at UCLA. I wish I could go back to that person and say, watch me now. It's so important to feel represented, and now I love my job. I definitely picked the best profession. I love being a professor for multiple reasons. One, I get to lead very big research studies to try to understand how can we better predict suicide and self-harm in teens and adolescents. Not only how can we predict self-harm and suicide, how can we treat it? How do we treat it from a trauma-informed lens? And how do we provide trainings, not just for psychologists? Suicide prevention is not just the work of psychologists, it's the work of everyone, of librarians, faith leaders, psychologists, teachers, anybody, nurses. This is really a community approach. If we want to improve suicide outcomes, we need to really train the community on how to address this. So I really love that part of my job at UCLA, and that I get to really be at the forefront of developing treatments. So I know there was a question in the back on how do we train people. My lab does that. We developed a 90-minute intervention that is trauma-informed, and we have been training all over the country on how can you prevent suicide from a trauma-informed lens, and I'm happy to provide training to anyone that is interested in this brief intervention. It's a family intervention. And you know, I was asked to share a little bit about what does the landscape of mental health look like, and the statistics that I'm about to show you, I don't want to do it to be overly alarmist or to scare you, but to initiate a conversation on how really our kids are struggling. And to also come together to think about solutions, community-driven solutions that we can all work on together. So I wanted to start with a content warning of, I don't want to scare you, I want to start a conversation about what's going on. And also I was asked, you know, as a psychologist, can I share some warning signs that parents can be on the lookout, you know, when they have youth in their, at home, and how can you be on the lookout? And I want to end on a positive note on the Youth Mental Health Academy, which is such a close program to my heart, and I'm going to be saving the best for last. So I'll talk a little bit about the academy at the end. So what you see up here are the 10 leading causes of death across different age groups. What you can see here is that for 10-year-olds to 25-year-olds, suicide is either the second or third leading cause of death. And I usually have a graph in where I show that deaths by motor vehicle accidents have gone down across time, and then for suicide, they have gone up, so they've crossed over. One of the things that has helped to reduce deaths by motor vehicles is that the use of seat belts. right? Or car seats for children. So one of the things that I try to teach the parents that I work with in my clinic is, how can you be a protective seatbelt for the youth in your life so that we can reduce their suffering and hopefully reduce deaths by suicide. I'm also a mom, so when I started doing this work, one thing that was very alarming to me, and just as context, the numbers that are underneath that are the number of deaths for that specific age group. One of the most alarming things is that deaths for children by suicide for ages 8 to 12 have been the largest increase. So as you can see here, in around 2012, we saw a big spike in deaths by suicide for children ages 8 to 12. I'm sure that in pediatrics, you have also seen that in your work. And what we're trying to understand in my lab is, what is going on to impact our children, our 8 to 12-year-olds? And the group that seems to have the biggest increase is actually Latino boys. So when you look at Latino boys specifically, their risk of dying by suicide is twofold when compared to other kids. So we just submitted a really large grant right now to try to understand what are the social cultural factors that are impacting children very early on in their life so that we can start treating it earlier on. We shouldn't have to wait until they're really suffering in their adolescent years to intervene. How can we intervene earlier? So this is what this graph is showing. I always like to share also what are some other key drivers that may be impacting suicide. So this is from the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey. So it's a survey that's conducted every other year with high school students across the US. And what you can see here is that 23% of high school students across the US are reporting that they're thinking about suicide, or that it's something that they've considered in the last 12 months. To me, that's a really high prevalence rate. 9% of high school students have actually had a suicide attempt in the last year. 16% have made plans for how they would actually take their life. And 40%, this is almost half of all high school students in the US, report feeling persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. That's a pretty big statistic. And this statistic actually went up post-pandemic. These are the newest reports. These are publicly available. If you just search YRBS report, you can download it as a PDF. And you can see other risk behaviors, risky sexual behaviors, how they've gone up. Substance use, as you can see, 22% of high school students report drinking in the last month, and 10% report using illicit drugs. So hopefully this gives you a picture of how much our kids are suffering, not just our adolescents, but our children too. If you're interested more in the California landscape, UCLA, the Public Health Department, does this survey every year by conducting random phone calls to California families to try to collect some data. And from this data, you can see for specifically California adolescents, 13% have considered suicide or have thought about suicide, and about 1/3 of them report feeling really anxious in their daily life. So what can we do about this? What are some strategies that can help us mitigate this? I won't go too in-depth into this, but I oftentimes get asked about, what about college student mental health? Can you say a little bit about that? So this is from the Healthy Mind Study. The Healthy Mind Study is a survey that's conducted across the US every year with college students, again, to get a better sense of their mental health. And you can see that the rates continue to be pretty elevated across college students. So it's really across our youth ages 8 to 25 that are really struggling across the board. One of the biggest issues from my perspective and from the work that I've done is that we do not have the workforce capacity to address these issues. A lot of students never even make it to an office to see a therapist or a social worker. And when they do, they have to wait 6 months. Some of the kids that I work with that are part of the juvenile legal system, they said, I violated my probation on purpose because I couldn't see a provider, and I was really struggling. And I knew that if I was in detention, I was gonna get a psychologist that day. That broke my heart, because kids should not be worried about who's going to give them this support. So from a public health perspective, we have a crisis in the mental health workforce. And two, going back to the comment that our panel was sharing, a lot of the providers that we do have sometimes don't have the lived experience or don't resemble the experiences that they want to discuss or bring into the room. There's actually been studies where they looked at county level professional shortage areas, and what they found was if you map on the number of mental health providers across California, the rates and where you see the highest rates of death by suicide are in areas where there are significant shortages in nurse practitioners, psychologists, and psychiatrists. You can actually really map it on almost perfectly by county. This graph also shows that where you have shortages, you have more untreated mental health and higher prevalence rates of suicide. So I think we've all made the point very clear that it is a workforce capacity issue. What can we do to address this? I also wanted to share how racial disparities are really prevalent in the workforce, right? So if you can see from 2011 to 21, these are 10 years across time, the number of psychologists that are from different racial ethnic backgrounds have only gone up 1 to 2%. We haven't seen a huge increase in the representation or the diversification of the mental health workforce. And one of the issues that has really impacted these breakdowns is a lot of youth just don't know what it is to be a psychologist, what it is to be a therapist or a social worker or a mental health advocate. They've never been exposed to these different career paths. So what we're trying to do, I'll skip this one, is very similar to the psychologist breakdown. One of the things that we're trying to do is how do we teach adolescents or high school students early on what it feels like to be a social worker, what it feels like to be a professor, what it feels like to be a mental health advocate, so that we can get to them early on, right? They shouldn't have to wait until after getting a 4-year degree to learn about the different careers in mental health. There are so many different careers in mental health that they can pursue, they just don't know about it, right? So that's where this beautiful program came into fruition. So this is the Youth Mental Health Academy, and we started developing this back in 2022 from funding from HCI on how do we not just increase the number of mental health providers, but how do we diversify it? And one of the things that we said, you know, we need to teach adolescents what it's like to be a professional in a mental health career. We need to give them mentorship to get to their goal, but we also need to give them hands-on training on how to be a mental health professional. So we developed the Youth Mental Health Academy, and it has 4 components. Number 1 is they spend 5 weeks across different campuses in California learning about mental health disparities, and mental health careers. Each day out of the 5 week of the academy, we have different professionals come and share what a day in the life looks like of a social worker or a nurse practitioner in a psych hospital. We also certify every single teen that comes into our academy on mental health first aid. So they all receive pretty good, rigorous training on how they can support their peers that may be struggling with suicide. So they all get a certification. After those 5 weeks, they're also given the task of finding a problem in their community and to do a research study based on a problem that they see on their community and to come up with community-driven solutions. We call that a capstone project that they have to do. At the end of the 5 weeks, they present their capstone project to their community, to their parents, to their family, and then they get to really share what they've been working on. One of the great things about this program is that they get $2,000 if they complete the first summer academy. They also get a computer, because a lot of these students say, well, I don't have a computer to do the research that you want me to do as part of my capstone. So all of the students that participate in YMHA in the summer academy, they get a $2,000 scholarship, and then they also get a computer. But that's not enough, right? We really wanted to build a comprehensive program. So after the 5-week academy, when they go back to school, we give them 9 months of mentorship with a college student. So if we have a student that says, I'm really interested in social work, we try to find a mentor that's a current college student or a grad student to be their mentor. Each mentor is assigned about 5 students that they work with, and throughout the year, they help them look at the college application process. They review their materials. They help them fill out the FAFSA. Sometimes they take them to a different campus to give them a campus tour, and they really build a really strong relationship. This is a plug for the 4 girls in the front. If you could apply to be a mentor, because the mentors also get paid $1,000. I know that's not a lot, but I can tell that it's really in your heart to pay it forward. I don't know, I'm just saying. But $1,000 is $1,000, and you get to mentor these students that probably look up to you, right, in their college-going career. But that's not it. There's still a third component of the program. After the entire year of thinking about college, their applications, meeting with their mentor at least once a month, they do a hands-on internship where they get another $2,000 to do a hands-on internship in 4 different tracks. And we have them pick what track they want to follow. Do you want to do a research track in mental health? Do you want to do a clinical track where you'll be at a community clinic or a hospital? Media communication, a lot of students said, I want to do social media to bring awareness on mental health. Great, pick that track on media communication. And then the 4th one is community advocacy. So when we get students pick the track that they want to do, we match them with a community-based organization to do a 5-week or 100 hours of a paid internship so that they could apply what they learned in the previous academy. So it's really a comprehensive 14-month program where they not only get resources to do the program, but they also get a lot of training, mentorship, and hands-on experience. From the first year where we piloted this program back in 2023, we were only able to recruit, I shouldn't say only, we successfully recruited 156 students. Primarily, it was so hard to recruit students because this funding came from the Child Mind Institute, and they were like, who's the Child Mind Institute? And why are they trying to recruit students from California? So building trust with community and with the schools, a lot of the schools, even when I told them that they would get scholarships, that they would get all these amazing things, the schools were like, well, we don't know you, and I don't know if we can partner or have this. So we partnered with Compton Unified. They were very welcoming to us. The superintendent met with us several times, and he helped us recruit a lot of the students in our program. As you can see, this is one of the most ethno-racially diverse group of students. All of these students that participated in the program have officially completed the program. 44 have gotten into college. And think about this, not all of them were seniors. I think only about 1/3 were seniors. So almost all of the students that participated in our program got into college, into a 4-year university. Isn't that great? These are students that didn't even know what college was or what a mental health career looked like. I was just sharing earlier, 2 of them got into Yale, full ride scholarships. Another one into Michigan, full ride scholarship to study psychology. 10 students got into UCLA, so I'm going to be closely monitoring those new students. Some got into USC, and that's fine. Oh, well, we can't take them off. I'm kidding. USC is a great school. It's a wonderful school, I promise. So this was last year. This year, we recruited 998 students. 998. And not just in LA, we were able to recruit students from the Bay Area and all the way up to San Diego. So across California, we were able to recruit 998 students to participate and successfully complete the first summer academy. Now our task for the second summer that's coming up is we need to find internships for these kids. So I'm looking at the resource tables. I know that there are some nonprofit organizations in the audience. Please follow up with me. We want to make sure that these kids are completing an internship in the community where they can really have a lot of impact. Again, we pay them to do the internship. We just need to partner with you so that they can be in your organization or where you have them. I have a slide here of all the internships that we did in year one. So we had Cedars-Sinai. So the students that said that they wanted to be in the clinical area, we had internships across all of these wonderful organizations. As you can see, we had the California Youth Crisis Line. So a lot of the kids did their internship on how to respond to crises to youth, and they got certified. A lot of students realized, I want to develop mental health digital tools. So we had a team that developed a whole app in the 5 week of their internship on how to address mental health. This kid had never had any coding experience, but they learned how to code that summer, which I thought was pretty amazing because I don't think I could learn how to code at this point in my life. But needless to say, a lot of these students are really excited about mental health careers. And to me, that's so beautiful that we're destigmatizing the field, because for a long time, when you said I'm a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you would get like, oh, you're a shrink. What are you doing? Okay. Even to this day, my family, trabajas con locos, you work with crazy people, but that's a whole other story. I think we're also destigmatizing the field as a whole, and I think that's one key feature that we're doing. So I don't think I have a QR code here, but I can share it, or if you just go to the Youth Mental Health Academy, the application, I promise, is very straightforward. It should take them no more than 30 minutes to complete the application. We ask all the students to answer 3 questions. Why are you interested in mental health? What are your goals for the future? And what are some barriers that you've had to overcome? We ask them to write a 500-word essay. We understand that not everyone likes to write essays, so we also give students the opportunity that if they do not want to write their 500-word essay, that they can submit a video telling us why they want to participate in this program. The application, I think, is open in about 7 days, but even if they submit an interest form today, we will email them to say, hey, the application is open. Eligibility to participate is they must be a high school student. They must at least be 15 when they apply, because they need to be 16 by the time that they do their internship in the second year. So we've really had a wide range of sophomores, juniors, and even if they're seniors, to apply into our program. And it must be in California. So we're expanding across different sites, across California, the Bay Area, and San Diego. So I love this program so much. I hope we continue to get funding to continue this program. I didn't mention that next year, in 2025, we are enrolling cohort number 3. So we're planning to recruit 1,500 students for that cohort, with the new development of having a remote academy, because a lot of students, although they loved driving to the different campus sites, it was a huge barrier. We had a family that actually would drive an hour and a half each day to bring their teen to the academy. And the parent said, I would do it all over. I would drive 3 hours to bring my kid to this academy because my kid developed so many strong relationships with the kids in the program. All right, how am I doing on time? Should I wrap it up? All right.
You're doing fantastic.
Last but not least, I had someone give me a plug for DBT. Dialectical behavior therapy has been shown to be the only level 1 well-established therapy to treat suicide. What that means, it's the only rigorously tested therapy that has shown to be effective in reducing risk for suicide. So because it's highly specialized, it's really hard to find a clinic that provides this type of therapy. The reason why DBT really works and it's effective is because it not only gives skills to the teen, parents are required to show up to therapy every week and to learn the skills. And not only do the kids get homework on how to practice distress tolerance, emotion regulation, guess what? The parents have to do the homework too. And we review their homework a week after. So it's a 6-month program. I am the associate director of this clinic. If you think someone might benefit from this program, I left our number and our email so you can contact us. And I really just want to end by saying that we did a study and where we looked at all of the treatments for suicide, and we found that the type of therapies that worked were the ones that included the parent. The other ones that didn't include a parent, guess what? They didn't work. And we looked at every single manualized treatment. It took me 4 years to code every single manualized treatment, and the only ones that worked had a parent component, and where the parent actually learned the skills and learned how to do safety planning. So parents really, really make a big difference in the outcomes that their kids experience in therapy as well. All right, I'll leave it as that there.
Well, I just want to make sure we have time for, let's give
Okay.
her a big round of applause. Is this on?
Go, Brian.
Can you hear me? No.
Maybe here.
We'll share the mic.
Yeah, we'll share them.
I just want to make sure, anybody have any questions for Dr. Mesa? Any? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I totally appreciate that. Yeah, the parental involvement is really crucial. I'm glad that they get trained as well. What about young people who don't have parents around, foster youth or unhoused youth, folks who may or may not have adults in their lives? Like, is there a plan to sort of address that?
Yes, and I love that question because not all of the kids have the opportunity to have an involved parent, right, that can participate. What we tell our youth is, do you have an adult in your life that you trust that can be part of this intervention? And in one of our research studies that we're doing right now, where we are enrolling kids that come into our ED and we give them follow-up care, a lot of the teens are not nominating a parent all the time. They nominate a mentor. Some of them have nominated their coach. I had one kid nominate their probation officer, and that's fine because we also train their probation officer on how to provide, like I said, that protective seatbelt for kids in times of need. So as long as it's a caring adult that's in their life and invested in their well-being, that's completely fine. Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned workforce capacity. Is that, besides just having number, is that also them having valid treatments that make sense? So I'm just going to give an example. Top-down theories that are more mind-based versus bottom-up theories that are more nervous system, body, somatic systems. Those work for more versus the top-down in my research and my experience.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So the example that you're giving is DBT. DBT is based on a biosocial theory, right? On like biologically, we have emotional predispositions that make us more vulnerable to having emotion dysregulation. So these type of therapies do have more robust training. But I also want to call out that there's a lot of bias in the types of therapies that get funding to get tested. So although there are a lot of bottom-up therapies, right, that are more maybe culturally nuanced or culturally developed, a lot of those don't get funding from the NIH. And I know this because I've submitted grants that have not been supported, right? So a lot of these, I think it also speaks to the systemic bias in our funding. The therapy that I was telling you that's 90 minutes, that one has shown to be effective across different cultures because it's trauma-informed and it's strengths-based. So we bring in what we call cultural assets into the therapy. How can you bring your own cultural values into the therapy session in those 90 minutes? So.
Question here.
It's a comment. I'm just going to echo what you talked about earlier.
The need to support the arts. We need to stop talking and actually getting those bodies, that's important.
Yes.
We have a question
Absolutely.
back here.
Thank you. I am very concerned. I like the fact that you're pulling in more diversities, but this is complex. The myths that surround the various ethnicities of color, especially for those who are considered black. Now, Doctor and I are the same color, but he's not seen as a black, as an African American. But I am, although I'm multi-ethnic. What is your program? It sounds wonderful. What is your program doing in order to overcome these goddamn myths?
Yeah. Are you talking about the Youth Mental Health Academy or my lab doing suicide research? Both. Okay, so for the Youth Mental Health Academy, we're partnering with leaders in the community that do look like the students that we're trying to recruit. And as you'll see in our website, we have students that resemble different backgrounds, different lived experiences. We had in the first cohort about 15% of students that identified as black that participated in the program. Now this year they're coming back as ambassadors talking about how the program changed their lives, because we also talked about disparities as part of the curriculum. We didn't overlook it, we talked about it. You know, black children get overdiagnosed with autism, ADHD, what do we do about it? So we made that part of the curriculum. Now for suicide, we're starting to uncover that the way that we screen for suicide doesn't capture black and Latino kids in particular, because if you think about the gold standard of how we screen for suicide, it's a single item on the PHQ-9, and the wording of that item says, do you think you would be better off if you were dead? And a lot of the kids that we work with, they're like, it's not about me, man, it's about my family. I think my family would be better off if I were dead. So even by changing the way that we ask and screen about suicide, it's allowing us to capture the kids that we're missing. So hopefully that addresses your question. We're developing a different scale that allows us to capture kids that manifest risk differently.
Yes. One more question here.
Just curious, do you look into reasons why children will do this?
Yeah. The question is, do we know the reasons of why kids have an attempt on their life? Suicide is the most heterogeneous clinical outcome, meaning that the reasons why someone does it is so different by group, by person, by experience, which makes it so hard to predict, right? It's so hard to predict this outcome. But what they all have in common is that the reasoning behind why they're thinking about ending their life is because in one way or another, they feel that they don't belong in the world and that they're a burden to society. Whether it's because they had a fight with their parent or with a boyfriend, or because they're doing bad at school, the mechanism or the one inclusive reason is really this feeling that you don't belong in the world and that you're really a burden to society.
Let's give it up for Dr. Mesa. I would just add a personal note. With my older brother, he would have been the last person on earth I would have thought was struggling with depression. He was such a confident, arrogant, person his whole life, and I never knew that he struggled with depression and anxiety my entire life. I didn't know until his first suicide attempt. And then it was, oh my God, it was there the whole time. So the circumstances are so different and so clouded and hidden. And so, by the way, wasn't this a great conference today? Get the link, share with your friend. There was so much information. So let's give it up for Dr. Sood, Dr. Mesa, Brittany, Leslie, Amy, Natalie. And I want to take a moment to, again, thank my staff for doing all the work. Give them a big round of applause. I want to recognize Tracy Andrews and Daisy Gomez from the LA Suicide Prevention Network for empowering our youth We're going to do presentations afterwards. I got gifts for everybody. I want to give a shout out to all our service providers, the Chinatown Service Network, Dee Hirsch, Suicide Prevention Center, Foothill Family Services, LA County Suicide Prevention Network, LA County Department of Mental Health, NAMI San Gabriel Valley, Pacific Clinics, Pelican Cove Counseling Center, and the Sycamores. Give them a big round of applause. Our presenters are going to be here for a little while. The booths are all here, so go get more resources, share, ask. I didn't know about the 2.5 more likely for Latinos, 8 to 12. I just texted the Latino caucus members, and I'm giving them your information. I mean, this affects everybody, right? Right? By the way, I'm a little bit sad. This is my very last event as a state senator, legislator, whatever you want to call me, neighbor. This is my final. We have one more community appreciation on November 9th. We're just going to invite everybody to Glendale Community College to just have a community appreciation. But this is our last formal town hall presentation. So thank you all for coming out and sharing. And talk to everybody here. Thank my staff and thank everybody and the speakers. Just awesome. Everybody have a good day. And remember, 2 things. What touches one of us touches all of us. We don't have to hit home runs. We just have to hit singles. Mother Teresa said, when they tell me my efforts are but a drop in the ocean, I say, isn't the ocean better off for that drop? If we all put a little drop in the water, then it becomes a tidal wave. Have a great day, everybody.